This is HOA checkmate. The accusation was loud, and the evidence was louder. Tracy Benson stormed out of the mailroom holding a broken box and screamed that I opened it. "Do not walk away from me." I froze with my hands still on the doorframe, my jacket half zipped, and looked at the torn flap she was waving like evidence. I had just grabbed my own package 2 minutes ago, a replacement phone mount for my rideshare work, and now she was pointing at me like I had committed a felony. I live in Clearbrook Village, a condo community in San Diego where the parking is tight, the garages are shared, and the HOA has more rules than the DMV. Tracy is the gate access coordinator, which means she controls who gets key fobs, who gets parking passes, and who gets threatened with towing if their guest stays 5 minutes too long. She loves that power. I drive rideshare full-time, which means I leave early and come back late, and lately she has been showing up exactly when I am heading out for my morning shift. It is not a coincidence. My employer is watching my attendance, and one more late arrival ends my probation. I cannot afford to play games with her. Tracy stepped closer, holding the box at eye level. "This was in my slot. You were just in here. Now it is open. I am the one who decides what counts." I recognized that phrase. She had used it a week ago when I asked why my guest pass got revoked after one complaint, but another unit had 6 cars parked overnight with no consequences. She said enforcement is discretionary, and discretion means her discretion. I shook my head. I did not touch your box. I grabbed my package, and I left. That is it. She tilted the box so I could see the torn tape. Then why is the packing tape lifted on one side? Why is the flap bent? I could see it clearly now. Someone had pulled the tape back just enough to peek inside, then pressed it down again, but the adhesive had lost its grip. The box had been opened, but not by me. I said that out loud. I did not open it. "Check the cameras. We do not have cameras in here," she snapped. "You know that. And you know I cannot prove anything without them. But I know what I see. You were in here alone. Now my package is damaged. That is enough for me." She slammed the box down on the mail table and pulled out her phone. "I am calling the tow company. If you are stealing from the mailroom, you are a security risk. I am having your vehicle towed as a precaution." I felt my chest tighten. My car was parked in my assigned spot. She could not do that. I told her so. She smiled. "I am the gate access coordinator. I approve or deny access. If I decide your vehicle is a threat, the tow company will remove it. I decide what counts." I walked out of the mailroom and went straight to my car. I needed to document everything before she escalated further. I pulled out my own phone and opened the timestamp app I use for rideshare disputes. I took a photo of my parking spot, my car untouched, and the current time, 6:42 in the morning. Then I took a photo of the mailroom door from the outside, showing no damage, no sign of forced entry. Nothing that would suggest I had been lurking or tampering. I uploaded both images to my cloud backup and sent a quick email to myself with the subject line, "Clearbrook Village Mailroom Incident, December 10th. I knew Tracy would not stop with a verbal threat. She never did. By the time I got back upstairs to my unit, she had already left a printed notice taped to my door. It was on Clearbrook Village HOA letterhead, and it said I was being investigated for theft and that my parking privileges were under review pending a hearing. No date for the hearing. No specifics about what I supposedly stole, just a vague accusation and a threat. I peeled the notice off and took another photo, making sure the timestamp was visible. Then I texted my friend Miguel, who drives for the same rideshare company and lives 2 buildings over. I told him what happened and asked if he had seen Tracy in the mailroom that morning. He replied within a minute, "No, but I saw her leaving the mail area around 6:30 with a box under her arm." She looked stressed. That box. I thought about it. Tracy had accused me of opening her package, but she already knew it was damaged before she confronted me. How did she know? If I had been the one to damage it, she would have had to open it first to see the problem. But she came out of the mailroom already holding it and already furious. That meant she had opened it somewhere else, seen the damage, and then decided to blame me because I was convenient. Or because I was a target. My phone buzzed. It was my rideshare app telling me I had a ride request in 15 minutes. I accepted it, grabbed my keys, and headed down to the garage. Tracy was standing by the gate access panel, talking to a man in a black uniform with a badge that said private security. She pointed at my car as I walked past. That is him. That is the one I told you about. The security guard looked at me, looked at my car, and then looked back at Tracy. Ma'am, I cannot detain someone based on an accusation. If you want to file a report, you need to go through the management office. Tracy shook her head. I am filing a report right now. I am telling you, he is a theft risk. I want him escorted off the property. The guard did not move. He just stood there with his arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and got in. Tracy stepped in front of my hood. I said, "Do not leave." I put the car in reverse and backed out slowly, forcing her to step aside. She yelled something I could not hear through the glass, but I saw her pull out her phone again and start recording. I drove to the exit gate, scanned my fob, and left. My hands were shaking. I had a shift to finish, but all I could think about was what she would do next. I finished my morning shift and came back to Clearbrook around 2 in the afternoon. There was a bright orange cone sitting in my parking spot. It had a laminated tag zip-tied to it that said reserved for HOA use. I parked in a guest spot and walked to the management office. The front desk clerk, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, looked up when I came in. Let me guess. Tracy. I nodded. She sighed and pulled up a file on her computer. She submitted a complaint this morning saying you damaged association property and that you are under investigation for theft. She also requested that your parking spot be temporarily reassigned to HOA vehicle storage. I asked what HOA vehicle storage meant. Sandra shrugged. We do not have HOA vehicles. I think she just wanted to block your spot. I can move the cone, but she will probably put it back. I asked if there was a record of the complaint. Sandra turned the screen toward me. It was a standard form with checkboxes and a comment field. The comment field said, Resident observed tampering with mailboxes. Potential theft. Recommend immediate suspension of access privileges pending board review. There was no evidence attached. No photos. No witness statements. Just Tracy's word. I asked Sandra if I could get a copy of the complaint. She hesitated. Normally, we do not release these until after the hearing. But since you are named in it, I can print a redacted version. She clicked a few buttons and handed me a printout with most of the comment field blacked out. I could still see the date, the time, and Tracy's signature at the bottom. I thanked her and walked out. On my way back to my car, I saw Tracy standing by the pool gate with a clipboard. She was talking to a woman in a gray polo shirt with a Clearbrook Village logo on it. The woman looked annoyed. Tracy was pointing at the clipboard and shaking her head. I kept walking. That evening, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered. A man with a flat, business-like voice said he was calling from Golden State Towing and that he had been authorized by the Clearbrook Village HOA to remove my vehicle for noncompliance with parking regulations. I asked what regulation I had violated. He said he did not have that information, but that the HOA had provided a written authorization and that I needed to move my car within 1 hour, or it would be towed. I told him my car was in a guest spot, not blocking anything, and that I had not received any notice about noncompliance. He said that was between me and the HOA. If the authorization is valid, I have to follow it. I asked if he could send me a copy of the authorization. He said he could not share that with me, only with the HOA. I hung up and called Sandra at the management office. She did not pick up. I left a voicemail. Then I called Miguel and asked if he could come down to the parking garage with me. He said he would be there in 5 minutes. I went downstairs and found my car exactly where I had left it, untouched. Miguel showed up with his phone already recording. We stood next to the car and waited. 20 minutes later, a flatbed tow truck pulled into the garage. The driver got out, looked at a clipboard, and walked over to us. You the owner? I nodded. He handed me a carbon copy form. This is the authorization from your HOA. It says I am supposed to tow this vehicle for unauthorized parking. I looked at the form. It had Tracy's signature at the bottom and a line that said, "Reason, security risk, theft investigation." I asked the driver if he had seen any actual violation, or if he was just following the form. He shrugged. "I just hook what I am told to hook. If the HOA says tow it, I tow it. But if you want to dispute it, you can call the number on the back of the form and file a complaint." I flipped the form over. The number was for the HOA management office, which was already closed. Miguel stepped forward and showed the driver his phone screen. "I have been recording since you got here. If you tow this car without verifying the claim, I am sending this footage to the towing commission." The driver looked at the phone, then at me, then at the form. He sighed. "Look, I do not want trouble. If you are telling me this is a bogus call, I am going to need something in writing from the HOA saying they made a mistake. Otherwise, I am just doing my job." I told him I would get something in writing, but I needed 24 hours. He said he could not promise anything, but he would note the dispute on his report and tell his dispatcher that the resident was contesting the tow. He got back in his truck and left. Miguel and I stood there in silence for a minute. Then he said, "She is trying to bury you. You need to go nuclear." I nodded. I knew he was right. Tracy was not just enforcing rules. She was inventing consequences and using vendors as muscle. If I did not push back, she would keep escalating until I had no car, no parking, and no way to work. That night, I printed every email I had ever received from the HOA. I printed the parking rules. I printed the guest pass policy. I printed the mailroom access guidelines. Then I went through my rideshare app and pulled my GPS history for the past 2 weeks. I highlighted every morning when I had left before 7, and every evening when I had returned after 6. I cross-referenced those times with the mailroom incident and the tow call. The timeline did not match Tracy's story. She had said I was in the mailroom alone, but my GPS showed I had been 3 miles away at a coffee shop when she claimed the package was damaged. I saved the GPS log as a PDF and emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Clearbrook Timeline Evidence." The next morning, I went back to the management office. Sandra was at the desk again. I handed her a printed copy of my GPS log and the tow authorization form. "I need this on file." She looked at the documents and typed something into her computer. "I also need to request a copy of the security logs for the mailroom. Do you have cameras anywhere near there?" She shook her head. "No cameras in the mailroom. But we have a camera at the main entrance that timestamps everyone who enters the building. I can request the footage, but it will take a few days." I told her to request it. Then I asked if there was a policy about HOA board members calling tow companies directly. She pulled up a policy binder and flipped through it. Board members can authorize tows, but only for violations listed in the CC&Rs. Theft investigation is not a valid reason unless there is a police report on file. I asked if there was a police report. She checked. No. Nothing filed. I asked her to note that in the system. She did. Then she lowered her voice. "Look, Tracy has done this before. Last year she tried to tow someone for parking over the line by 2 inches. The board overruled her, but she still put the guy through 3 weeks of hassle. If you want to fight this, you need to go over her head." I asked who that was. She said the HOA board president, but that the president was barely involved and usually just signed whatever Tracy put in front of him. I asked if there was anyone else. She thought for a moment. "The management company has a regional supervisor. If you file a formal complaint with them, they have to investigate." I asked for the supervisor's email. She wrote it down on a sticky note and handed it to me. I went home and drafted an email to the regional supervisor. I attached the GPS log, the tow authorization form, the redacted complaint printout, and a timeline summary. I kept the tone professional and factual. I explained that Tracy had accused me of theft without evidence, attempted to have my car towed without a valid violation, and blocked my parking spot with an unauthorized cone. I asked for an investigation into her conduct and a review of the policies she was enforcing. I hit send and waited. 2 days later, I got a response from the regional supervisor. She said she had reviewed my complaint and that she would be scheduling a meeting with Tracy and the board president to discuss the allegations. She asked if I was available for a follow-up call. I replied yes and gave her my number. The call came that afternoon. The supervisor, whose name was Linda, sounded tired but professional. She said Tracy had submitted a rebuttal claiming that I had been verbally aggressive in the mailroom and that she had acted within her authority to protect the community. Linda asked if I had any witnesses. I told her about Miguel and his footage of the tow driver. She asked me to send her the video. I forwarded it within the hour. Linda called me back the next day. She said the video was helpful, but that it did not address the mailroom incident directly. She said the best way forward was to request a formal hearing in front of the HOA board so that both sides could present their evidence. I agreed. She said she would schedule it for the following week. I thanked her and hung up. Then I realized I still did not have the building entrance footage. I called Sandra. She said the footage had been pulled, but that the management office was waiting for board approval to release it. I asked how long that would take. She said it could be a few more days. I told her I needed it before the hearing. She said she would push it through. That weekend, Tracy left another notice on my door. This one said I was in violation of the guest parking policy because I had been using a guest spot for more than 72 consecutive hours. I checked the policy. It said guest spots were for visitors, not residents, and that residents could only use them temporarily if their assigned spot was unavailable. My assigned spot was still blocked by the cone. I took a photo of the notice, a photo of the cone, and another photo of my car in the guest spot. Then I emailed all 3 images to Linda with a note saying Tracy was creating violations to justify her original accusations. Linda replied within an hour. She said the behavior was concerning and that she would expedite the hearing. She also said she had received the building entrance footage and that it showed Tracy entering the mailroom at 6:28 in the morning and leaving at 6:31, then returning at 6:38 with a box. The footage showed me entering at 6:39 and leaving at 6:40. Tracy had been in the mailroom twice before I even arrived, and the second time she had already been carrying the damaged box. Linda said this contradicted Tracy's claim that I had been alone in the mailroom and that the box was fine until I touched it. She said she was forwarding the footage to the board president and recommending that Tracy be removed from any role involving enforcement or vendor coordination. I felt a wave of relief, but I knew Tracy would not go quietly. The hearing was set for Thursday evening at 7. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I printed the footage timestamps. I printed the GPS log. I printed the policy excerpts showing that theft investigation tows require a police report. I printed Miguel's video still showing the tow driver's uncertainty. I put everything in a binder with tabs and page numbers. I even printed a side-by-side comparison of Tracy's complaint form and the entrance footage timestamps, showing that her story was physically impossible. The hearing was held in the clubhouse, a small room with folding chairs and a folding table. The board president, a retired accountant named Dan, sat at the head of the table. Tracy sat to his right with a stack of papers and a red stamp she kept tapping on the table like it was a gavel. Linda sat to his left with a laptop open. I sat across from them with my binder. Dan opened the meeting by reading the complaint out loud. He said Tracy had accused me of mailroom theft and that I was contesting the accusation. He asked Tracy to present her evidence first. Tracy opened her folder and pulled out a printed packet. She started reading from it in a loud, measured voice, like she was performing for an audience. On December 10th at approximately 6:40 in the morning, I observed the respondent exiting the mailroom with a package in hand. I returned to the mailroom moments later and discovered that my personal package had been tampered with. The packing tape was lifted, the flap was bent, and the contents had been disturbed. I immediately confronted the respondent, and he became verbally aggressive and refused to cooperate. I notified security and requested a tow as a precautionary measure to protect the community from further theft risk. That is my right as the gate access coordinator. Dan looked at me. Do you want to respond? I opened my binder and pulled out the entrance footage timestamps. I handed a copy to Dan and a copy to Linda. I pointed to the highlighted lines. These are the timestamps from the building entrance camera. Tracy entered the mailroom at 6:28. She left at 6:31. She returned at 6:38 carrying a box. I entered at 6:39. I left at 6:40. Tracy was in the mailroom twice before I got there, and the second time she already had the damaged box in her hands. If the box was fine until I touched it, how did she know it was damaged before I even arrived? Tracy slammed her hand on the table. That footage is irrelevant. I am the gate access coordinator. I decide what counts. Dan held up his hand. Tracy, let him finish. I continued. I also have a GPS log from my rideshare app showing that I was 3 miles away at a coffee shop at 6:20, which means I could not have been in the mailroom at the time she claims. I have a witness who saw Tracy leaving the mail area with a box at 6:30. I have a video of the tow driver admitting he had no independent verification of the violation. And I have the HOA policy that says theft investigation tows require a police report, which does not exist. Linda leaned forward. I reviewed the footage myself. It supports his timeline. Tracy, do you have any evidence that he damaged your package? Tracy opened her mouth, closed it, and then pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and then turned it toward the table. I have this. It was a doorbell camera clip showing the mailroom door. The timestamp at the bottom was blurred and unreadable, but the clip showed someone in a black jacket walking toward the mailroom. Tracy said, "That is him. That is proof." I looked at the clip. The person was wearing a black jacket, but so were half the residents in the building. The timestamp was too blurry to verify the time. I asked Tracy where the doorbell camera was located. She said it was hers, mounted outside her unit on the second floor. I asked how a doorbell camera on the second floor could see the mailroom, which was on the ground floor at the opposite end of the building. She did not answer. Dan asked the same question. Tracy said the camera had a wide angle and that she had repositioned it temporarily to monitor the mail area. Linda asked if Tracy had notified the HOA or the management office about installing a camera pointed at a common area. Tracy said she did not need permission because it was her camera. Linda typed something on her laptop. Actually, the CC and Rs require board approval for any surveillance equipment pointed at common areas. If you install this camera without approval, that is a separate violation. Tracy's face went red. I did not install it. I repositioned it temporarily. That is not the same thing. Linda shook her head. Intent does not matter. The policy is clear. And even if the camera was legal, the timestamp is unreadable. This does not prove anything. Tracy grabbed the phone back and swiped to another screen. She held up a different image, this one showing a close-up of a portable thumb drive sitting on a desk. This was in the mailroom, lost, and found. I checked it yesterday. It has files from his rideshare account on it. That proves he was in there stealing. I froze. I had lost a thumb drive 2 weeks ago, but I had assumed it fell out of my jacket somewhere else. I asked Tracy how she knew it was mine. She said the files had my name on them. I asked to see the drive. She pulled it out of her jacket pocket and held it up between 2 fingers, dangling it like evidence. Dan asked if he could examine it. Tracy hesitated, then handed it to him. Dan plugged it into Linda's laptop. Linda opened the file directory. There were 3 folders: rideshare logs, tax documents, and receipts. All 3 folders were dated from mid-November. Linda clicked on the Properties tab. The files were created on November 18th. Dan looked at Tracy. This drive was lost 3 weeks ago. How does this prove he was in the mailroom on December 10th? Tracy stood up. I am not here to be interrogated. I filed a complaint in good faith. If the board does not want to take theft seriously, that is on you. But I am the one who decides what counts as a violation. Not you. Not him. Me. She pointed at me. Your timeline is irrelevant. Dan raised his voice. Tracy, sit down. This is a formal hearing. You do not get to leave until we are finished. Tracy sat down, but she was shaking. Linda closed the laptop. Based on the evidence presented, I am recommending that the complaint be dismissed and that Tracy be placed on administrative leave from any enforcement role pending a full audit of her conduct. Dan nodded. I agree. The complaint is dismissed. Your parking privileges are restored, and the cone will be removed immediately. Tracy, you are no longer authorized to coordinate with vendors or issue tow requests. Any further violations of policy will result in removal from the board. Tracy grabbed her papers and her phone and stormed out of the clubhouse. She slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. Dan looked at me. I apologize for the trouble. We will be reviewing all of Tracy's recent actions to ensure this does not happen again. If you have any further issues, contact Linda directly. I thanked him and left. I walked back to my car feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The cone was still in my spot, but I moved it myself and parked. I took a photo of the empty spot with the cone lying on the curb and texted it to Miguel. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. The next morning, I got a call from Sandra at the management office. She said Linda had requested a full audit of Tracy's vendor contacts and that several irregularities had been found. Tracy had been calling tow companies, landscapers, and delivery services on behalf of the HOA without board approval, and in at least 3 cases she had misrepresented the board's authority to pressure vendors into taking action against residents. Sandra said the board was meeting that afternoon to discuss terminating the vendor contracts Tracy had abused and to vote on her removal from the board entirely. I asked if I needed to be there. Sandra said no, but that I would be notified of the outcome. If you are enjoying this wild ride, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA chaos and satisfying payback. That afternoon, I got an email from Linda. The board had voted unanimously to terminate Tracy's role as gate access coordinator and to revoke her authority over vendor relations. The email also said the board had discovered that Tracy had been using the same complaint template for multiple residents over the past 6 months, changing only the names and dates but keeping the same accusations and phrasing. The same complaint template appears in multiple files, proving someone is mass-producing fake outrage. Linda attached a redacted copy of the templates showing identical formatting, identical checkbox patterns, and identical language. It was clear Tracy had been running a campaign of selective enforcement, targeting residents she did not like, and inventing violations to justify punitive actions. The email also said the board had requested access to the mailroom lost and found logs, and that several items reported as lost over the past year had never been logged or returned, including my thumb drive, 2 Amazon packages, a set of car keys, and a bag of petty cash from the clubhouse vending machine. Linda said the board was considering filing a police report for theft and that Tracy would be required to return all items in her possession or face legal action. I forwarded the email to Miguel and called him. He said, "I told you to go nuclear." I said, "I did not even have to." She buried herself. 2 days later, I was getting ready for my morning shift when I saw Tracy standing by the pool gate again. She was holding a clipboard and talking to a man in a work jacket. I recognized him as the landscaping vendor who serviced the common areas. I could not hear what they were saying, but Tracy was pointing at the clipboard and shaking her head. The vendor looked annoyed. I walked closer, staying out of sight behind a pillar. Tracy was saying, "I do not care what the board says. I am the one who approves access to the pool equipment. If you do not have my signature, you do not get in." The vendor said, "Ma'am, I have a work order from the management office. I do not need your signature." Tracy pulled out a cheap whistle on a lanyard and blew it once, loud and sharp. "That is trespassing. Leave now or I am calling the police." The vendor looked at her like she had lost her mind. He pulled out his phone and called someone. A minute later, Sandra came out of the management office and walked over to the pool gate. She said something to Tracy I could not hear, but Tracy stepped back. Sandra opened the gate with a key and let the vendor through. Tracy tried to follow, but Sandra blocked her. I heard Sandra say, "You are not authorized to be here. The board revoked your access yesterday. If you do not leave, I will call the sheriff." Tracy stood there for a moment, breathing hard, and then walked away. She passed right by me without noticing. That evening, I got another email from Linda. The board had completed the audit and had formally terminated all vendor contracts that Tracy had initiated or managed without board oversight. The email listed 5 contracts, including the tow company she had called to threaten me. The HOA terminates the vendor contract Karen abused. Linda also said the board had filed a complaint with the San Diego Sheriff's Office regarding the missing items from the lost and found, and that Tracy had been given 72 hours to return all HOA property in her possession. If she did not comply, the board would pursue civil action for reimbursement. The email included a timeline summary prepared by Linda. It showed every interaction Tracy had initiated with residents, vendors, and staff over the past 6 months, cross-referenced with building entrance footage, vendor invoices, and complaint forms. Karen's timeline is proven false with timestamps. The summary proved that Tracy had been in the mailroom, the clubhouse storage closet, and the pool equipment room at times when she had claimed to be elsewhere, and that several missing items had last been seen in areas she had access to. The board had also reviewed doorbell camera footage from multiple residents and found that Tracy had been walking through the building late at night, on several occasions, entering and leaving common areas without logging her presence. I printed the timeline summary in the email. I made copies and put them in a folder. Then I made one more copy and walked down to the mailroom. I taped it to the bulletin board next to the HOA newsletter. It was a side-by-side timeline I print and hand out in front of everyone. I did not add any commentary. I just let the facts speak. By the next morning, half the building had seen it. I got 3 texts from neighbors I barely knew, all saying some version of thank you for dealing with her. One neighbor said Tracy had tried to fine him $200 for leaving a recycling bin out past pickup time, even though the pickup had been delayed by the city. Another said Tracy had threatened to revoke his guest pass because his nephew parked in a guest spot for one night. The stories kept coming. On Saturday, I was loading groceries into my car when I saw Tracy walking toward me from the direction of the clubhouse. She was carrying a cardboard box and a black trash bag. She walked past my car without looking at me and went to her own unit. I watched her make 3 trips, each time carrying another box or bag. On the 4th trip, she left the door open, and I could see inside. The floor was covered with packages, envelopes, and loose items. It looked like a storage unit that had been emptied in a hurry. I took out my phone and recorded a short video from my car, making sure the open door and the pile of items were visible. I sent the video to Linda with a note. Thought you should see this. Linda called me 10 minutes later. She said she was forwarding the video to the board and that she would be contacting the sheriff to request a welfare check and an inventory of the items. She also said the board had scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday evening to vote on Tracy's removal from the board entirely. I asked if I needed to attend. She said no, but that the board wanted to thank me for my cooperation and my documentation. She said my evidence had made the audit possible, and that without it, Tracy would likely still be in her role, targeting other residents. Monday evening came and went. I did not hear anything until Tuesday morning, when Sandra called me. She said the board had voted to remove Tracy from the board, to ban her from any HOA volunteer role for 5 years, and to require her to reimburse the HOA for all missing items and any fees paid by residents as a result of her false complaints. The missing stash is discovered, the HOA must refund fees, and Karen is removed from her role. Sandra said Tracy had been escorted from the property by a sheriff's deputy after she refused to surrender her keys and tried to re-enter the management office to access the filing cabinets. I asked if she was arrested. Sandra said no, but that the deputy had issued her a written warning for trespassing and had confiscated her access fob and keyring. The next day, I received a check in the mail from the HOA for $120. The memo line said reimbursement for parking and tow-related fees. I also received a formal apology letter from the board president, Dan, acknowledging that Tracy had abused her authority and that the board had failed to provide adequate oversight. The letter said the board was implementing new policies to prevent similar abuses in the future, including mandatory board approval for all vendor contacts, quarterly audits of enforcement actions, and a formal complaint review process for residents. I ran into Miguel in the parking garage a few days later. He asked how it all turned out. I told him about the board vote, the reimbursement, the apology letter, and Tracy's removal. He laughed. She tried to flex authority, and the policy says she cannot. I nodded. That was the funny part. Tracy had spent months weaponizing HOA rules against other people. But the moment someone actually read the rules and applied them to her, the whole system turned against her. She had built her power on selective enforcement and intimidation, and it collapsed the second someone forced accountability. I never saw Tracy again after that week. I heard from Sandra that she moved out of Clearbrook within a month. Someone said she sold her unit at a loss because she could not stand the looks she got from neighbors. I do not know if that is true, but I do know the building felt different after she left. The new gate access coordinator was a retired teacher named Phyllis, who actually smiled when she handed out parking passes. The tow threats stopped. The fake complaints stopped. The mailroom stayed quiet. I kept driving rideshare, kept making my shifts on time, and kept my probation clean. My employer never knew about the HOA drama, which was exactly how I wanted it. I still have the binder I made for the hearing. I keep it in my closet as a reminder that documentation beats intimidation every time. I also keep the thumb drive Tracy tried to use as evidence. I wiped it and started using it again for my tax backups. Every time I plug it in, I think about how close I came to losing my car, my job, and my reputation, because one person decided she was the law. The building entrance camera is still there, time-stamping everyone who comes and goes. The mailroom still does not have cameras, but the board installed a lock on the lost and found cabinet, and only Sandra has the key. The pool gate still requires a key, but now the landscaping vendor has his own copy, and no one can block him. The parking spots are still tight, but the cones are gone. The guest passes still have rules, but they are enforced evenly now. Clearbrook Village is not perfect, but it is livable again. I still think about that morning in the mailroom when Tracy came at me with the broken box and the accusation. I think about the moment she said, "I am the one who decides what counts." I think about how much power she thought she had, and how quickly it evaporated when someone finally said, "Show me the receipts." I think about the tow driver who hesitated, the security guard who refused to play along, the vendor who called Sandra instead of following Tracy's orders. I think about all the small moments when people could have looked the other way, but did not. I also think about the timeline Linda built, the one that proved Tracy had been lying from the start. I think about the thumb drive she tried to use as proof, and how the metadata betrayed her. I think about the doorbell clip with the unreadable timestamp, the entrance footage that caught her in 2 trips, the complaint templates that were identical across 6 months of fake outrage. I think about how she kept doubling down, kept escalating, kept threatening, until the evidence stack was so high she could not see over it anymore. And I think about the moment Dan told her to sit down, and the moment Sandra blocked her from the pool gate, and the moment the sheriff told her to leave the property. I think about how she froze mid-rant when I played the clip in front of witnesses, and how her face went from red to white in the span of 1 sentence. I think about the side-by-side timeline I printed and taped to the bulletin board, and how half the building saw it before she even knew it was there. I think about the reimbursement check, the apology letter, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I did not have to break any rules to win. I just had to follow them better than she did. Tracy Benson thought she was untouchable because she controlled the gates, the vendors, and the notices. She thought enforcement was discretionary, and discretion meant her discretion. But the HOA was not hers. The policies were not hers. The authority was not hers. It was all borrowed, conditional, and temporary. And the moment she abused it, the system took it back. That is the thing about petty tyrants. They build their kingdoms on quicksand, and they never see the ground shifting until it swallows them whole. I still drive past the pool gate every morning on my way out. I still scan my fob at the exit gate. I still park in my assigned spot. And every single time, I think about the cone, the clipboard, the whistle, the red stamp, and the woman who thought she could decide what counts. She was wrong. Thank you for listening.